Have you ever wondered why some people work harder every year, yet somehow end up with less money? And why another tiny group less than 1% of the population makes more money in their sleep than most people earn in a lifetime? What if the reason the rich keep getting richer has nothing to do with budgeting, discipline, or talent? What if it's because the financial system is rigged to turn your spending into their investing? You see, the image you're looking at is simple spenders buy clothes, food, gadgets. Investors buy stocks, businesses, courses. But what if I told you this visual is only the surface? That underneath it is a trillion-dollar shadow machine silently sucking in your money. A machine that transforms your everyday purchases into leveraged profits for the ultra-wealthy through something called the shadow banking liquidity funnel. A system so hidden, so intentionally complex, that even governments don't fully understand how it works. And here's the punchline. Every financial collapse you've lived through 2008, 2020, and the one coming connects directly back to this funnel. Before we dive in, let me ask you something real quick. Where are you watching from? I want to know the global family that's listening to this truth. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button, because in this channel, you don't get motivational quotes. You get the unfiltered financial truth nobody else will dare to tell you. Now buckle up, because once you understand how the wealthy really think, you'll never look at money or your own habits the same way again. To understand the secret behind why rich people invest and poor people spend, we need to go back in history, far back. Because this divide didn't begin with TikTok, Starbucks, or iPhones. It began in 1694, the year the Bank of England was created. Before that, wealth was simple. If you had gold, land, or armies, you were rich. But once central banks emerged, a new class of wealthy was born: the financial elite. These weren't kings. These weren't emperors. These were credit creators, people who could create money from thin air and then lend it to others for profit. Sound familiar? Because that system didn't disappear. It evolved. Fast forward to 1913, the year the Federal Reserve was born. The world changed overnight. Now money wasn't tied to gold anymore. It was tied to debt. And whoever controlled debt controlled wealth. By the time we reached the 1970s and Nixon ended the gold standard, the game was over. Money became unlimited for the people who knew how to create it, and painfully scarce for the people who only knew how to earn it. Sound familiar? The rich weren't getting richer from hard work. They were getting richer because they understood one truth the masses ignored. Money isn't real. It's a system of flows. If you can control the flow, you can control the wealth. And that brings us to the modern divide you saw in the image. Spenders buy clothes, gadgets, nights out, dining. Investors buy assets, stocks, equipment, courses. But here's the real plot twist. Both groups feed the same system. The only difference is that one group does so voluntarily, while the other unintentionally finances the empire of the elite. Let me explain. When you buy a $1,200 phone, that money doesn't just go to Apple. It enters a chain of lenders, brokers, and shadow banks that use your spending as collateral to create even more leverage. When you spend $100 eating out, that money doesn't end with the restaurant. It enters credit markets, bond markets, derivatives markets. Sound familiar? Because in every recession, every inflation crisis, every debt bubble, we are told it's the consumer's fault. You spent too much. You didn't invest early. You didn't save. But nobody tells you that your spending is actually fueling the profit system of the people who built the rules. See, history shows a pattern. The poor spend money. The middle class saves money. The rich multiply money. But the ultra-wealthy do something else entirely. They recycle your spending into their investment pipelines. And that pipeline, hidden from textbooks and governments, is called shadow banking. A $240 trillion network, yes, trillion with a T, that operates outside official banking. This is where the real power lives. This is where the real money flows. And it's time you finally learn the truth. You might think the biggest financial institutions in the world are JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, Citibank, HSBC. But nope, those are just storefronts. The real power lies in entities you've never heard of. Non-bank lenders, derivatives dealers, repo market brokers, liquidity recyclers. These aren't companies, they're networks. Webs of contracts, hidden agreements in the dark corners of global finance. And this is where the twist comes in. Every time you spend money like a spender from the image, your dollars don't vanish. They enter a pipeline called the shadow banking liquidity funnel, where your purchases become someone else's collateral, your debt becomes someone else's asset, your consumption becomes someone else's leverage. It's a perfect machine. The wealthy aren't rich because they invest. They're rich because your spending flows through their investment engine. And there is one name, one institution that quietly built this mechanism over the last 40 years. This entity sits between governments, central banks, and global financial institutions. A puppet master in all but name. And when I reveal, it too won't believe how deep the influence goes. But before we uncover that, we need to break open the mechanism itself. Because once you understand how the shadow banking funnel works, we'll finally understand why the rich invest and why the poor never escape the trap. And trust me, you won't believe the name behind it. The shadow banking liquidity funnel exposed. Let's break it down simply. Every dollar you spend has a second life that nobody ever told you about. Step 1. You spend gives, they collect you buy a $150 pair of shoes. Great, you look good. But the store immediately sends that money to their suppliers, their banks, their credit lenders, their payroll accounts. This means your $150 instantly becomes a financial asset circulating in the system. Step 2. Banks turn your spending into collateral. Banks don't just sit on deposits. They package them, repackage them, and use them to borrow more money. Using your money, they create new money. Here's a real number. $1 in deposits can support up to $10, $30 in shadow liquidity. Shocked? Good, because it gets worse. Step 3. Your money enters the repo market. The repo market is a short-term lending marketplace worth over $4.5 trillion. Daily, this is where hedge funds, investment banks, large corporations trade money overnight. Your spending supports this market indirectly. How? Because every business your money touches uses credit. And that credit becomes collateral for repo transactions. Step 4. Derivatives multiply the system. Derivatives are bets on top of bets. The derivatives market is currently estimated at $1.2 quadrillion. That's $1,200 trillion. This is where banks gamble, using corporate debt, consumer debt, retail spending, even your monthly payments. This is the core moral hazard. Your spending funds, they're gambling, but their losses become your crisis. Step 5. The wealthy profit from the leverage loop. Here's the shocking part. While you're dealing with inflation, rent, and rising grocery prices, wealthy investors benefit directly from rising asset prices, leveraged credit expansion, stock buybacks, corporate bond inflation, because the entire system pushes your dollars toward asset markets. Your spending gives business revenue, gives corporate deposits, gives bond issuance, gives stock buybacks, gives rising valuations, gives profit for investors. That's the loop. That's the funnel. That's why wealth inequality keeps rising even during recessions. Shocking statistics required 5 numbers. Here are the numbers the media never tells you. The top 1% owns 53% of all U.S. financial assets. The bottom 50% own barely 1.5%. Shadow banking assets now exceed $240 trillion. The repo market processes $4.5 trillion every single day. Derivatives exposure is over $1.20 quadrillion. Every $1 spent can generate up to $30 in financial leverage. This isn't a financial system. This is a wealth extraction machine. And here's where it gets dark. The moral hazard nobody talks about: when you spend money, you take the risk. When corporations and banks use your money, they take the profit. When banks lose, you bail them out through inflation, higher taxes, job losses, reduced services, currency devaluation, and when they win, they keep everything. This is the illusion. This is the parasitic cycle. Your lifestyle spending is their liquidity. Your debt is their asset. Your consumption powers their empire. The entity behind IT, all you're waiting for the name, right? It's simple. The BIS Bank for International Settlements. The most powerful bank in the world that nobody talks about. Not elected, not accountable, immune to laws, immune to taxation. The BIS regulates global liquidity, shadow banking flows, repo markets, and derivatives exposure. It is the central bank of central banks, sitting in Switzerland, above every global government. And it orchestrated the very system that ensures the poor stay spenders, the middle class stays savers, and the rich remain investors. While the ultra-rich extract liquidity from everyone, the BIS built the modern shadow banking system. And that system is the backbone of the wealth divide. Now you see the full picture. So here's the real message. The battle was never between spenders and investors. It was between the people who understand the flow of money and the people who don't. Rich people don't budget. They position themselves along the liquidity stream. Poor people don't fail. They simply get positioned at the bottom of it. Because the system was engineered to keep the majority consuming, while a tiny minority collects the compounding leverage. And here's the final warning. The next collapse, whether it's 2025, 2027, or 2030, will hit harder than 2008. Why? Because the same system now moves faster, digitally, globally, algorithmically. Shadow banking used to take days. Now it takes milliseconds. Derivatives used to be controlled. Now they're automated by AI. Repo markets used to be stable. Now they are fragile, over-leveraged, and interconnected. We are living in a world on borrowed time. A world where trust has replaced gold, and illusions have replaced value. So I'll leave you with one question. Are we wiser now, or just walking the same path in better suits? If you wanted the truth, you got it. Now do your part. Drop a comment. Where are you watching from? And more importantly, do you trust this system anymore? Hit subscribe if you want the next chapter of this investigation. Because this rabbit hole goes deeper than you think, and I'm not stopping.